Okay, here's the video lecture for the master plan, in case you missed class or you want to review. This is going to be the final document that illustrates basically everything that you need for your design. It'll include all plans, construction documentation, and if you are not the installer, the more documentation will probably be required so that your installer doesn't mess up your design. Keep in mind that all of these things are not necessarily always needed. You might not need construction documentation if you're only installing some plants. You're obviously not going to need an irrigation plan unless you're installing irrigation. Generally speaking, if you have to go through all of the steps, you're going to go out to the house, you're going to do a site analysis, site inventory, you're going to speak with your client. You may go through your concept plan and your bubble diagram so you can organize all of your ideas on paper. You're going to put a preliminary design on plan. You might take that preliminary design to the client and discuss with them, and then come back and present a final master plan to them. As a reminder, the preliminary design is just simply getting your ideas and some concepts on paper. Notice here with these symbols, we're not changing anything. We're not adding in plant materials. We're simply saying this is going to be a large tree. Here are some annuals over here. Here's a perennial garden or whatever it is. We're going to add the details later when we do the master plan. You might need a full set of documentations. You might need a planting plan. If your design is very plant heavy, you might need to break out different sections of the garden and or the landscape so that a person can see, oh, over here, I'm going to have to put in a lot of different plant material. If you are doing the install of hardscapes, gazebos and pergolas and fences and pavers and things like that, you might need your contractor to know exactly how you want your base material put down. If there are extreme changes in elevation, you're going to need to show how you're dealing with that. You might have an irrigation plan, a lighting plan. So all of these might be part of your final documentation. So here's an example of a planting plan. It is simply one section of a garden or a landscape, and it's showing where all of the individual plants are going. So this would just be one small piece of an entire master plan. Here's an example of construction documents, so you can see how things are planted, how your base material is going, how you want your trees staked, how you want that arbor put together, and what it should look like from all sides. Because remember, when we're doing landscape design, we're only seeing things from a bird's eye perspective. So that does not give us anything other than what it would look like looking face down. So these other documents allow your contractors and or your installers to know exactly how you want things put in the ground. Here's an example of a fence. You can see it's an unusual fence. It's a slightly different fence, and this gives you everything about what you need to know to build this fence. Where your posts are going, what your materials are, how those posts are going to be built, how your base material is going in. So another example of a type of construction documentation. If there's topography, you might want to include the topographic map. Now here's the challenge with these. A lot of our clients aren't going to be able to read these because they're not used to looking at topographic maps. So you might include a very simple 3D rendition. If you look at this, this is really not much more than sketching. And we're going to use Google SketchUp to do these sorts of things if we need to do these sorts of things for our clients. Irrigation plans. This is one part of an irrigation plan, so it shows you all the different types of heads, where they're spraying, what lines they're connected to, where you want the lines installed, where the valve boxes are located, and those sorts of things. So this would give you one piece of an irrigation plan. Here's another way to look at this. So this is a different layout for where your various zones are going, and this would be a broader view for that particular plan. Lighting plans can be very simple or very complex. So this, again, maybe you're not doing anything. You'll notice the graphics representation here is not that great, simply because it's not necessary to do that particular level of graphical detail just to know where the lights are going. This is one way to do it. It's not the only way to do things. This is one of the ways that I like to organize things step by step and move through the process, but you may find that a different step by step works for you. So you can take a look at this and figure out which steps work for you, which steps you want to do at the same time. You can add your symbols while you're putting your plant list together. You can be doing them both at the same time. most of our computer software will do this at the same time for you. So we're going to talk about how to get Dynarscape to do that as well. You could use a label like this, and that cleans up your designs a little bit. Helps also for those of you who might have spelling issues when it comes to your plant names. So you can use a key like this, and then you can use an Excel spreadsheet. That will also help you keep track of your names. I'll show you an example of a key. What you put on your key might depend upon the clients that you're dealing with. Botanical names are important, particularly if you're not the installer, because then whoever is going to the nursery to get your plants knows exactly what they're supposed to be getting. Obviously, common names are necessary for your clients because they're probably not going to know the common names. You might have the sizing from the nursery. You might not, but if you're not the one picking out your plants and somebody else is picking them out, you probably want the size. The spacing on center, particularly if you're laying out large quantities of very small plants. So if you're installing plugs for a prairie garden or for large areas of ground cover, you might want to know how far apart they're spacing. So this might be a very simple example of that. You can see the key that we would use on the design on the very far left. And if you need any notes, in this case the note says that there's going to be spaced 12 inches on center. Dynarscape can do this automatically. Most software programs will do this, at least with your plant lists, automatically. You can actually build in Dynarscape your hardscape materials, so whenever you are building a patio, it knows that your patio is going to have X number of this brick per square feet, your basing materials and your screening materials, so you can actually build those things in Dynarscape if you want to do that. Obviously, Excel and Access, you can build those things within those programs as well and use those things to help you do your estimate. For pricing, I don't necessarily recommend including it for anything that's going to a client, because then you're going to run into the argument, well, I can get that $5 less if I go over here, and you don't need them to see those sorts of things. I always recommend that you give copies to your clients, because then if something goes wrong, you have the original plan. If something has to get changed on site, you can note that with a Post-it or in the computer for what happened and why it needed to get changed. If you need all kinds of documentation, if you need the final landscape plan and a lighting plan and an irrigation plan and planting plans and construction documents, I highly recommend you take that someplace and have it bound so pages don't get lost. Storage is up to you. Flat is easier to work with in the long run, but it also takes up more storage space. So a lot of people do store things round or in tubes. A lot of time nowadays, if you're storing on a computer, if you're doing everything in Dynarscape and Excel and Access and things like that, or some other software program, storage is very, very easy at that point. So these are a couple of videos that will talk about the process of landscape design from beginning to end, and then the one on the various plans will take you to the landscape network, which will show you examples of all of the different types of plants. All right, as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch.